Hypothetical questions are what-if questions where we have to extrapolate what might have happened or should have happened in a particular situation. And these are some of the hardest kinds of questions that we have to answer. So today I thought I'd share how I dealt with hypothetical questions and how that worked out. Hypothetical questions are actually useful in situations where we want to explore different scenarios. For instance, if I had been sight impaired and asked for assistive technology, would my boss have responded to that request the same way she responded to my request having IBSD and requesting a flexible schedule? Probably not. So in situations like that, asking hypothetical questions can cut through the BS and reveal underlying biases and other hidden truths. And hypotheticals are useful when we're probing the strength of a particular argument. For instance, my boss wouldn't allow me to do certain tasks when I was teleworking as a reasonable accommodation, such as making phone calls, answering emails, reading reports, or doing research. Whenever I asked to do those things from home, she told me that they could wait and said I'd have to take leave. At my hearing, my attorney asked her why, and she said it was because she considered those things make work, and she didn't think NASA should have to pay me to do them from home. My judge probed that argument with some hypothetical questions. What if she'd been in the office doing those things, answering calls and so on? Do you think NASA should have paid her to do those things then? That one question pretty much annihilated my boss's argument and made it really clear how she'd been playing with my reasonable accommodations. Now, a lot of the hypothetical questions that our employers ask us are intended to be inflammatory because they know if they can provoke us into reacting emotionally, it's going to make us look like the problem and get them off the hook. The very first question NASA asked me when they were cross-examining me at my hearing was a question like that. They'd found an old profile of mine online where I listed PhD, ABD, as part of my educational history. ABD means all but dissertation, and that means that I finished all the work toward my PhD except for the dissertation, which is the final step. It's not the same as having the actual degree, but it is a significant body of work beyond what I had to do to get my master's degree. So the question NASA's attorney asked me right out of the gate was this: wouldn't you agree that PhD ABD is just another way of saying that you don't have a PhD? Now, I'm sure she expected me to get all bent out of shape and react, but I didn't. I didn't explain what ABD means like I just did with you guys. I didn't explain why I wanted to include it in my educational history, and I didn't explain that the reason I never finished that dissertation is because other parts of my life had to take precedence over getting another degree. I just said no, I don't agree. And I figured if she wanted to know why I didn't agree, she could ask. But she didn't. When we're answering hypotheticals, I think it rarely works in our favor to be defensive. First of all, every minute that we spend defending ourselves is another minute that nobody's focusing on what our employer did. I tried to minimize the time I spent doing that. And getting defensive can also make it look like we're trying to avoid the truth or make excuses for something we know we did wrong. I didn't want to give NASA any of that, so I stuck pretty much to answering exactly the questions they ask and leaving it there. I figured if they wanted to know more, they could ask me more questions. I resisted the urge to explain my answers, and what I found was that often a simple yes or no can be a lot more powerful than a big long explanation. There were times when I couldn't answer with a simple yes or no because of the way the question was asked. I had to qualify my answer. And sometimes to do that, we have to be a wee bit defensive. But I tried to keep that to a minimum. Would you agree that when an employee is chronically AWOL, they shouldn't be on a flexible schedule? Now, I knew what they were trying to do. They were trying to set up a defense for my boss who took me off my flexible schedule on the same day I requested reasonable accommodation. I had to be careful how I answered that. So what I said was, well, that's not the situation in my case, but in the situation you're describing, I guess I can understand why they might have some concerns. And sometimes we might want to ask for clarification, like with the question I was just talking about. Can you explain what you mean by chronically AWOL? It's not a bad approach when you feel like the question they're asking is overly general or vague. However I decided to answer, I tried to make sure that I was being honest, respectful, and non-defensive. And I tried to keep it as concise and low drama as I possibly could. And for me, that worked. NASA wasn't able to score any points with their hypotheticals. So that's my experience for what it's worth. I definitely recommend you guys check out what some attorneys have to say on the subject, and I'll leave you some links in the description to get you started with that. I'll see you next time. In the meantime, take care and hang on. Fight smart.